Hi, everyone. We're going to wait a few minutes for the attendees to join. While we're waiting, I'm going to share just a few housekeeping issues before we get started. This presentation is being recorded and will be made available in the next coming days. If you have signed up, if you're here, you'll also receive an email from us when the webinar is available. Please feel free to share that link with others who may want to log on who weren't able to be here today. If you have questions, we ask that you use the question and answer area. We will not be taking questions during the presentation, but hopefully we'll have time at the end. Please type your questions as they come up, and if we have time at the end, we'll try to address all of them. So welcome to Alpine Learning Group's Innovation in Autism series. This webinar, How Parents Can Promote Positive Behavior in the Home and Community, is one in a series of free webinars that we've presented over the month of April. At the close of the presentation, we're going to share a QR code so that you can learn about other presentations that were part of this series. So those of you who may not know, I'm Dr. Bridget Taylor. I'm CEO and co-founder of Alpine Learning Group. And for over 30 years, I've had the pleasure of working alongside a group of innovative and compassionate leaders in the field of autism. I'm so happy that we've been able to share their expertise with you through this series of lectures. And today I'm very excited to introduce to you Jaime Stine and Brielle Spangenberg, BCBAs who work at Alpine Learning Group as expert clinicians. They will be sharing with you information today about how parents can promote positive behaviors in home and community settings. I'll let Jaime and Brielle take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget, for the intro. I'd like to thank everyone for attending our talk today, How Parents Can Promote Positive Behavior at Home and in the Community. As Bridget said, my name is Jaime Stine, and presenting along with me today is Brielle Spangenberg. This presentation does contain videos that were recorded after consent was provided by the legal guardians of the children and are for the sole purpose of this webinar. Please do not use personal devices to record or take pictures of the children shown in the webinar. Our colleagues at Rethink Behavioral Health have also provided permission for us to use their instructional videos during this presentation. You can go to rethinkbehavioralhealth.com for more information. Today, we will be discussing 4 main topics that can help promote positive behavior: daily routines and choices, prevention strategies, teaching critical skills, and managing challenging behavior. Within each topic, we'll be providing many examples and providing strategies that you can implement at home and in the community. First, we're going to discuss daily routines and choices. We'll be outlining some strategies and tools that can be used to help keep daily routines as consistent and predictable as possible, and what to do if unexpected changes come up. We'll also discuss the importance of incorporating choice and best practices on how to do that. For many people with autism, unpredictable situations and transitions between activities can lead to challenging behavior. So, for example, transitioning away from a video game and to the dinner table, or if a daily routine is unexpectedly interrupted. Some strategies that can ease the anxiety of unpredictability are the use of first then or when then language, using visual cues, as well as providing written and/or verbal reminders when deviating from the routine, and also providing reinforcement specifically for flexibility. First then or when then language can be particularly helpful and makes the order of events that will occur clear. For example, first we'll brush your teeth and then we'll read a book, or when you finish your homework, then you can play outside. Written or pictorial visual cues can be paired with this language and referred to as well. Of course, things don't always turn out as planned, so if deviating from a routine, provide a reminder as well as reinforcement for accepting the change. On the next few slides, I'll be reviewing some common and easy-to-use visual cues. First, we'll review the use of activity schedules. Activity schedules are used to provide a visual representation of a series of tasks. Activity schedules are typically meant to be completed independently by the individual, but they don't have to be. The setup of these schedules should be individualized for the person who's using it. For example, for an early learner, you may want to use a series of photographs or activities in a flipbook with one activity per page in order to reduce distraction. For an older learner who's able to read, a written list of activities may suffice. There are also many apps that can be used to create activity schedules, such as Pictello and the First Then visual schedule app. Some apps can even embed videos along with pictures, text, and audio to customize the schedule for the needs of the individual. Overall, activity schedules help make routines more predictable and can help increase independence. On the next 2 slides, we're going to see some video examples of activity schedules. This is an example of a photographic independent leisure schedule. As you'll see, the photographs are arranged with one on each page, and the child follows the routine of pointing to each picture, getting the corresponding activity, completing it, putting it away, and returning to the schedule to repeat those steps of the routine. In the video, the child will be following the schedule independently. When activity schedules are first introduced, however, teaching will have to take place. Later on in the presentation, Brielle is going to be discussing ways that we can teach these types of skills. So let's take a look at the video example. I don't think that there was any sound on the video that you heard, but typically during activity schedules, the instruction is given at the beginning, follow your activities, and then we would want to avoid providing a lot of instructions during that time. So just providing reinforcement at the end of the chain. We can go on to the next slide.
Your activities.
So in this next video, we're going to see an example of a morning routine that's completed using a schedule. So the setup will be a little bit different in this video, as you'll see. It's set up more in a list format with a combination of photograph and text to represent the activity to be completed. And again, in this video example, you'll see that the child has learned how to follow the schedule and is independent in this example.
Hey, Noah. You all ready for school? Yeah. Whoa, that was record time. Was that like 5 minutes you got already? Hey, guess what? Okay. You got ready by yourself all week. You get a new toy. Good work.
Calendars, timers, and appointments can also be helpful strategies for routines and transitions. Having a visual of current and upcoming events helps us know what to expect and when it's going to happen. When setting up a calendar, it can be set up as just daily, so just seeing what the daily activities are for the day, weekly, or monthly. Sometimes too much information can be overwhelming, and just knowing the activities for the current day or the current week is enough. You can teach your child to cross off the previous day, review the current and upcoming activities for that day, and maybe the next day as well. Timers are also a great tool to help a learner transition from one activity to the next. When setting a timer, you can let the child know how much time they will have for an activity and give reminders leading up to the timer ringing. You can also teach your child to ask for an additional minute if they're not yet ready to transition to the next activity. Finally, creating an appointment for an upcoming activity can help with children who have difficulty waiting. It may also help a child with understanding when an activity will occur. This strategy works best for learners who are able to tell time, either on a digital or analog clock. You can write the time for the appointment, what the activity will be on a Post-it, and place it next to the clock. Technology can also be used to create appointments for activities in the future, such as using smart speakers and Siri. Next, Brielle will be discussing the importance of choice, as well as prevention strategies to prevent challenging behavior.
Thank you, Jamie. So next we'll talk a little bit about choice, and giving people choice is a very powerful tool. It's easy to implement, and it's a proactive strategy that makes people feel like they're a part of the process. Quite simply, we all like having options, and there are a lot of ways to set this up. I'm sure that some of you like to have options as well as I do myself. So we'll be covering some tips on how to help make this prevention strategy successful. So there are a lot of choices that you have when putting choice into practice. You can provide a choice, such as presenting two options of different activities, or which activity within an activity. So for our first example here, we have, you can either brush your teeth or get your pajamas on, two separate activities. Or if something involves a choice within an activity, we have to get dressed and put our pajamas on. Maybe we can provide a choice about what those pajamas are going to look like. Paw Patrol pajamas or Cars. The next example for a choice opportunity would be who's involved or who is helping. Is it going to be dad or mom? Is it maybe even a sibling or mom? Or maybe it's a TV character, favorite toy character that they have that's going to help them get dressed on the way. Then there is going to be specific characteristics within an activity. So things like color, right? Do you want to sit in the green chair or the purple chair? Would you like 2 toys or 4 toys or minutes? Or the length of time, do you want a longer time or a shorter time? The order of activities might look like presenting a few choices that need to be done, but there is some flexibility in when to complete them. So the learner can choose whether they want to do math first or if they want to color first, and kind of set up that list of to-dos together. And lastly, we have how to complete an activity. So here are just a few examples of how to demonstrate the things that we need to do. So maybe we need to transition to the car. Do you want to hop like a bunny there or run like a cheetah? Do you want to go super fast or should we go slow like a turtle? So here we have a really nice visual online. It's from another provider, and there is a QR code on the right corner side that you can use to scan your phone. It will take you to the provider's website blog. And it also has a lot of resources there to purchase for things like Jamie was mentioning, like schedules and visuals to use in the home environment. And there's a few tips here that will make building in choices helpful. So most importantly, when you provide the choice, you want it to be stated as one question rather than stating multiple separate questions. So this really just means that we're going to say it as both parts in one question. So meaning you don't want to ask, do you want to eat chicken for dinner? Do you want to eat pasta for dinner? But matter of fact, just saying, do you want to eat chicken or pasta? So you're combining it into one question. Simply, we're just putting the options together. What happens when a learner says neither, though, right? Sometimes we see this where the learner says, no, I don't want that. No, I don't want that. Or just doesn't answer and doesn't make a choice. So it's important to really remember that our little ones are persistent. They're strong-willed, maybe even have a history of negotiation to meet their needs. And these are good self-advocacy skills, and we want to honor them when we can, but sometimes we can't, right? So here in this situation, we're providing a fixed choice, and these are the only options. In my practice, I have found that giving multiple opportunities and setting it up for success is really about creating and establishing firm expectations and boundaries. So I might say something like, you know, this is your choice and you have the choice to make it, but you need to do it quickly. You can make the choice or I'm going to make the choice, and we can give them the second opportunity, maybe even a third opportunity. But I would give a warning first before moving to it's my choice now. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next piece of this infographic. And so it's really best to only say choices that you are totally okay with. You don't want to give choices that are just not available or choices that you know you're not going to be able to ultimately honor. We're giving that choice an opportunity for the learner to have that autonomy and be involved. We need to honor the choice if we're going to provide that opportunity for them. Their voices need to be heard and respected. So if an item is not a choice, just don't make it a part of the choice when you present it to them. This is going to set up the strategy for failure and will likely make the learner feel frustrated. So let's always make sure we're giving choices that are available. This process really makes people feel like it's a collaborative, together decision. It decreases power struggles and makes the learner feel involved and have some sense of control over the process, especially during tasks that maybe are not so fun or motivating to do. You also want to avoid empty threats, like Santa Claus isn't coming, or you're going to leave grandma's if you don't start behaving. So we want our words to really be meaningful, and we can provide choices that are clear, that are reasonable and practical for the learner to be involved. We want our words to really mean what we say and refrain. What we don't want to do is teach the child, well, they say that, but it's not going to happen. So let's make sure that we're providing choices and opportunities that we're able to follow through on. And this is typically a common practice. I did see that the highlight went on a little bit late, so I apologize for that. Okay, so moving forward towards prevention strategies. To promote positive behavior, one strategy we're going to review is called environmental enrichment, or otherwise EE, which is an easy way to reduce the chances of problem behavior or challenging behavior happening in the first place. So we're looking at prevention here. And the second strategy here takes a look more closely at the communication skills and teaching more effective, safer ways to meet that learner's needs. Both prevention strategies are both implemented proactively. So we're going to talk a little bit about both. So first we have environmental enrichment. And this is really what I like to call making it their happy space. We want that learner to be so content that there's no problem behavior even to worry about. So in this setup, it's going to look like what we call non-contingent access. And that really just means that it's a free time to have those favorite preferred things, those preferred leisure activities that are their absolute favorite. They don't need to do anything for it. They don't need to do homework, do their chores. They just have a free time to engage. And this is typically used with learners that have the ability to play and maintain their engagement and sustain their interest with at least one or more items. So we want them to be able to have the time and skills to keep themselves occupied during that space. And this strategy is really, really great because it benefits both the learner and the caregiver. It's a stress-free time where you are just able to enjoy the things that you love. We often find in the literature and in our practice that when there is high engagement with items, so when they're playing with their favorite toys, there is less problem behavior likely. This allows us to have a lot of time to multitask, do things that we need to do, and really complete some things that maybe at other times are not really practical. It's also a time to just take a break sometimes, right? Maybe we need 5 minutes for ourselves. We had a really busy work day. There's a lot going on. We need to bring each kid to a different community event. Maybe I just need 10 minutes to de-stress and have a break. And this is a great time where you can implement this as well. Environmental enrichment is very low effort. And we'll talk a little bit about how to set that up on one of the next slides as well. Lastly, the other benefit from using this strategy is that you're able to see and actually evaluate over time if the things that we think are valuable, if they actually are valuable. So maybe we think this is their favorite toy and we put it out and they're maybe bored with it after a minute or so. So taking a look at what does the child actually play with? Do they seek out other toys when that item is available? Is there maybe it could be even something that is looking at if that item will maybe function as a future reinforcer. So when can you go into enrichment mode? I talked a little bit about the times that are helpful, right? Where we need to multitask. There's so many things to get done. Times where multitasking has to take place, like getting a meal ready for the family. I need to cook dinner. Or my oldest son needs help with his math homework, right? And my younger son, maybe this would be a good time to set up EE for the younger child. Or it could be even times where the setting or task is hard for the learner. We mentioned here behavioral flexibility, and this is what I'm referencing. So situations where waiting for a really long time is involved, being in a medical office during a doctor's visit, or during a family party, or a holiday gathering. Usually there's a lot of overstimulation, lots of people, lots of noises, moving bodies, lots of expectations, routine changes. There's a lot going on. So these are great times where we can think about setting up an EE time period to take a break for both the learner and the caregiver. Okay, so as just like most strategies, planning is very important here. We really want this strategy to work. It sounds really easy, right, in theory, but there's always things that we need to look at in advance and make sure that we can put into place to make it really successful. These factors can help or backfire this strategy. So first, what we like and what we are in the mood for is constantly changing. Always, for everyone, me, you, our kids. I know that I don't want to eat the same dinner that I ate yesterday, right? I don't want to do the same activities every single day. I'm going to get bored with those things. I like to change it up. So we talk about this on our slide is mentioning momentary preferences. So we're really looking at in that moment, what are the motivating situations, toys, activities, interactions, things that they want to do. This could be really exacerbated by just providing choices, right? What are the things that you want to play with today? We can put those 5 things out. That might look different than yesterday's. So basically our point here is try not to assume what is going to be best, and also be mindful that that's going to change over time. So we'll want to take a look at which things are really motivating over time and look and observe engagement with the items. When there's no demands in place and when things are always available, what are they doing? Are they playing with those things? Do they seem interested? Is it something that's really fun for them? We also want to prevent satiation. So we want to be mindful of not overdoing it. Avoiding providing EE for really long time periods. We don't want it to be the case where, they just get it all the time. It's so long that now maybe nothing is motivating and we don't care about any of those toys. We want to keep a time frame that's reasonable and that's long enough that also doesn't increase that satiation. We want to prevent boredom here. So thinking about questions like how often is that item available itself? How long is the time frame of the EE period? And varying what is available is an easy way to keep motivation alive. Next, we'll talk a little bit about functional communication training. And this is a common intervention strategy that really focuses on communication. We're talking about appropriate communication that's effective in getting our needs and our wants met. So this is where we're really looking at a problem behavior and taking a look at what can we teach to establish this new relationship, this new connection as a replacement. So we're no longer looking at making that problem behavior results in the things that we like, whether it's to get something or to maybe take a break from a challenging task. We want to teach an appropriate way to get that need across to somebody. It's really important, the why here, which I will share a lot of examples on our future slides. I did want to make it a point here that a new skill is established, and we're also being mindful that the learner's current skills matter. It doesn't need to be a vocal. When I say communication, I don't mean a vocal communication and expressive communication. It can be a gesture, it can be a sign, it can be a picture card, a text, a button, it could be a vocal. So it just depends on the learner. So let's talk about how to put functional communication training into action. So we're going to see several examples on the next few slides here. And our goal here is to make it very clear how we can address the problem behavior by teaching an alternative communication skill. So here we want to look at reinforcing or delivering that preferred consequence after a behavior to increase that skill. We want to see that communication increase, and we want to see that challenging behavior decrease. So we're going to be breaking that connection between the problem behavior resulting in reinforcement. We're no longer reinforcing problem behavior. So here in our example, the behavior we have that we're concerned about is hitting. And this is the behavior we're looking to see go down or extinguish. And like I mentioned before, the why is very important, because the why is what's maintaining that behavior over time. And that is going to help us understand what's going on. What is it that is missing for that learner? What need is not being met? And first, we need to start with the communication piece. So here, our reason why is that hitting is resulting in getting that favorite toy. I hit because that toy then comes to me so easily. So in order to get that favorite toy without hitting, here we're going to teach that learner to say the word ball. And when they say the word ball, then we will provide that toy. So this is an example where we are teaching communication to access a toy or a physical, tangible item. In this example, our behavior is still hitting. So I would like to point out that here, our reason why is different. Okay, so our reason here now is that we want to have some interaction, some play, or some conversation interaction with my sibling. I hit and my sibling starts interacting with me more. And I think it's funny, maybe even. So I'm going to think about the why here, because it's the same behavior. It looks the same, but it's happening for a different reason. And this is a great point to take in, because we are going to use that function to learn how to teach the communication here. In this situation, we might teach that learner to gesture, just come over here, and wave for their sibling to come over, rather than going to engage in aggression to get them to come over. Okay, so our next example here is a common one that I see in the homes and in my own family life as well, right? Mom is on the phone or is busy, and the child is screaming mom's name repeatedly and tugging on the shirt on the bottom, maybe even stomping their feet, or really just seeking that connection from their parent. And it's usually not at the best times, right? It's usually a time where our attention is a little bit divided. So in this situation, we want to engage again. We want some interaction with mom. I want to play. I want to talk to mom. I have something to tell her that happened. Why won't she listen to me? I really need her. So in this situation, rather than getting to hang up the phone and then engage with the child after screaming and tugging on the shirt for so long, here we might just teach our learner to say, excuse me, with their hands down, maybe not pulling on mom's shirt, and maybe even incorporating a waiting for the mom to answer me part. All right, so our example here is ripping up homework, writing practice homework. So I don't want to do it right now, and I'm just going to rip it up because then it's gone. And so we really want to look at ways to teach an appropriate way to escape or avoid a challenging task. And so in this situation, we're going to pretend here that the reason why is that like I said, don't want to do my writing practice right now, and I just want to go jump on the trampoline. So in this situation, we might teach communication to take a break or ask for a break. And this learner, we might have taught to point. So that would have been an example of a gesture or a non-vocal way to get your needs met or across. So this is, again, about functional communication training. It's about establishing new skills to meet the needs without engaging in dangerous or inappropriate behavior. So this is really kind of step one, right? There's the building tolerance part of it. But here is such a important first piece that we first need to build on that communication and being able to meet those needs that are so, so important. So at this point, we have discussed how daily routines and activities can be structured to prevent challenging behavior. And now Jamie will dive into what skills we can teach our learners, and we'll talk a little bit about strategies to teach those skills as well.
Thanks, Brielle. So when we're thinking about teaching skills, there's so many different skills that come to mind. There's a lot of different things that we can cover. So how do we decide where to begin? I will be giving some suggestions of 6 critical skills that we can teach that will help lead to positive behavior. So the first category that I'd like to talk about is just generally keeping busy. Sometimes in children with autism, leisure time is not spent productively engaged in functional activities. And in these cases, we want to teach appropriate leisure skills that will help keep your child focused and on track during downtime at home. One way to identify additional leisure skills is to closely watch your child to identify their interests, and then we can expand upon those interests. So for example, is your child interested in water play, enjoys playing in the sink and in the bath? We can take that interest and think of activities such as Water Wow, which may be of interest and may be a little bit more functional and can be completed during additional times outside of bath time. Or does your child enjoy reciting the letters of the alphabet? We can think about expanding that to letter and number puzzles or apps such as Endless ABC. Another consideration when thinking of leisure skills is whether you want them to be independent or cooperative. If you're using an activity schedule at home, you may want to incorporate some independent leisure skills, such as coloring, with some cooperative ones, such as playing a board game or a card game. In addition to leisure skills, we can also teach developmentally appropriate chores, such as wiping counters, unloading the dishwasher, setting the table, emptying garbage cans, assisting with laundry, cleaning up toys. There's a lot of different activities and chores that we can teach to help keep your child busy at home and engaged. Helping out around the house is a great way to stay busy. These chores can also be incorporated into the activity schedule that we discussed earlier. It's definitely important to have a focus on teaching independence at home. When children are very small, naturally we do a lot of things for them, but if we're not careful, we're going to continue to do those things for them as they age, and they may not naturally learn how to complete those important daily living skills on their own. Particularly important are self-care and domestic skills, which will enable an individual to lead a productive and independent life. When people can complete daily living skills on their own, they may engage in less off-task behavior, and these skills allow them to be more independent around the house. So I would suggest taking a week and making a list of what you're still doing for your child, in particular in the areas of self-care and domestic skills. So just some examples would be bathing, grooming, food preparation, cleaning up, and different things like that. And then from that list, we can prioritize particular skills to teach. The next thing that you want to do is to identify the best times to teach these skills. So if you can, it's great to teach the skill when it naturally occurs. So for example, loading the dishwasher after a meal, or washing your hands after using the restroom or before a meal. However, you may want to identify other times to set aside to teach if it's typically a very stressful time of day or you're in a hurry. An example of this might be avoiding teaching shoe tying during the morning rush. Set aside some time in the afternoon to practice so that you have a little bit more success. It's a less stressful time of day and you're a little bit more relaxed with that time to teach that skill. As Brielle discussed earlier, it's very important to teach communication to get our needs met. So this critical skill number 3 is soliciting attention. Teaching your child to ask for attention or help instead of engaging in challenging behavior by using the functional communication strategies that we reviewed in the first section. This is definitely a critical skill that will help promote positive behavior in any environment, whether it be the home or the community. Next is accepting no. No can be a very, very loaded word. Oftentimes it's associated with a long history, not getting a preferred item or an activity that you really, really want, and a lot of disappointment. One thing that can help is varying language. So for example, instead of saying no, you can say, how about we do X instead? Or how about we do this other activity instead? We can also provide a lot of reinforcement for accepting no and refraining from engaging in challenging behavior. And the type of reinforcement that you use should be individualized for your child. So for some children, highly enthusiastic praise will be very motivating. For others, possibly a small treat would be better. Providing a rationale for why the child can't have what they've asked for can also help, as well as incorporating choice, as Brielle discussed earlier. Waiting is a very critical skill. It occurs so often and in so many ways in our daily lives. So whether it's waiting online at the store, waiting for a meal in a restaurant, waiting for a show to load on Netflix, waiting in a doctor's office, all of those different settings can be very challenging. The strategies that we discussed earlier in the presentation regarding keeping consistent routines can be helpful when teaching a child to wait. So a timer can be a very helpful visual to count down to the end of the waiting period if we know particularly how long the waiting period will be. You can use a digital timer or I really like visual timers. You can download a visual timer app for your phone. You can have that with you wherever you are. Something like that typically could look similar to the graphic that I have displayed up here, where the arrow will go around and will reveal sometimes a picture or change the different colors so the child can see the end of the waiting period. Appointments and visual cues, such as the calendar, can also help a child to understand how long the waiting period will be, particularly if it's something that is going to be longer than a few minutes. Let's say they have to wait for a vacation or something like that. It's a good idea to have a few activities to complete during a waiting period if it's going to be longer than a few minutes, such as waiting at a doctor's office. So I do typically recommend to families to have a backpack or a bag that has some non-perishable snacks and a few activities that your child enjoys that you can quickly grab on your way out the door and present to your child during that waiting period. And as always, it's important to always provide reinforcement for waiting appropriately without engaging in the challenging behavior. And the final critical skill that we suggest teaching is transitioning between activities. So oftentimes moving from one activity to another, whether it be between preferred activities, from a preferred to a non-preferred activity, can trigger challenging behavior. This may be due to the individual either not wanting to terminate the first activity, trying to avoid the next activity, or it really could be due to a lack of understanding of the sequence of events that's going to occur. When teaching transitioning, as we've discussed for all of the critical skills, reinforcement should definitely be provided when the child transitions between activities without engaging in the challenging behavior. Using first then or when then language, as we discussed earlier, can also ease challenges associated with transitioning from one activity to another. And you can also use visuals, such as a picture or a schedule to cue the next activities. So here I've just added some examples of how that could look when put into practice. And coming up next, Brielle is going to discuss some specific ways that we can teach these critical skills.
Learning the many critical skills Jamie mentioned will involve some direct teaching. So this means we need to, again, carefully plan not only what to teach, but how we're going to teach and what types of strategies to use for that learner to apply the skills and be able to use that in their life in a way that it's going to promote that ongoing use, that it's valuable and it's something that they regularly are going to apply daily. So ultimately, we're talking about skill building here and how to get there using principles such as prompting and feeding our assistants out, reinforcement, and shaping. Okay, so if you've had previous training or experience with ABA services or in behavior analysis, then it's sure that you've already heard the use of positive reinforcement over and over and over, just like we have mentioned it many times today. This is because it's an extremely powerful learning tool that involves increasing future behaviors, future skills that we want to see. It's a positive teaching practice, and that involves planning. We have to plan in advance in order for it to work. So here, if a skill or behavior is not increasing or maintaining at a target level, then we need to take a look into the very many considerations of why. It could be simply that the choice of the consequence is not truly a reinforcer. Maybe it's not functioning in a way that we had thought it was going to be. It could be that the timing is too delayed after. So maybe that connection between the behavior and the reinforcer is not so clear to the child. It could even be that the quality of the reinforcer is too small compared to how effortful that skill is. It takes a lot of practice. I will say that skills take time, right? They're new habits. And just like riding a bike or learning a new language, that's going to take a lot of opportunities to get fluent with and be able to apply that skill to the regular ongoing daily situations that happen. So when we put these principles together, this is how we build skills. So positive reinforcement, as I was mentioning just before, we need to prompt, we need to show the child how, or the learner how to get to that skill, how to engage in that target behavior that we're looking for and we're looking for seeing. This is so important. And there's a lot of ways to prompt. We can prompt using help by modeling a skill and actually demonstrating and showing them how to do this by performing it. You can also help guide physically if we need to, right? Sometimes it is necessary. Zipping a coat is such a hard skill for our little ones that are learning and so motivated to get dressed, but it involves a lot of fine motor skills. So modeling might not always be as effective as using a little bit of physical shaping to help them be more successful. So there's a lot of different ways to prompt, but it needs to really be individualized to that learner. So there's lots of strategies, but we want to be effective and also not intrusive, right? If we know that learner can learn from a model, then we don't want to use a physical. So we want to always take those kinds of things into consideration. We also want to be mindful about prompting effectively. So we want to make sure we're not what we call nagging, right? So this would be like telling the learner what to do over and over, but the learner's just not doing it, right? So we're just like, come on, put your shoes on, put your shoes on. I told you to put your shoes on. So we're just repeating the direction over and over, which we like to call like I mentioned, nagging. But in this situation, we would want to come over after the first or second time of saying it and actually providing a prompt to show the learner how to engage in that skill. And the very important piece here that promotes that independence is carefully fading our help out. We don't want to over assist, and we want to be super careful about it ongoing. I think Jamie mentioned earlier, right, when our little ones are little, we're always doing things just naturally, and it's kind of a bad habit of ours. But we need to be mindful of those kinds of things. We need to take a step back and be like, oh my gosh, am I over assisting? Can the learner actually do this on their own? Can I test it and see where their skills are? So thinking about fading our help out very systematically as that person becomes successful. We don't want to fully remove all of our help and then the learner doesn't know what to do. We want to promote that independence by doing it in a way that's gradual and that also promotes that independence slowly. Okay, so moving forward, I'm going to share a little bit about a strategy we call shaping. But first, I wanted to give an example about what this typically looks like. So shaping is a strategy that we use in behavior analysis, but this is an example that's very typical. So when a young toddler is learning to get on their feet, they don't automatically start walking at the same pace as you and I, as grown adults. They first start to crawl, and maybe then they start to stand with maybe some even adult supporting hands on them. Maybe then they start to hold on to a stable item like a piece of furniture and walk around those items while holding it. And then maybe they start to take a few steps without holding items until they're eventually walking with confidence and stability. And this is an example of shaping behavior over time. It's gradual, it's taking baby steps and building that confidence until we're ready to move on to the next step. So this is a way to think about how to keep expectations reasonable for you, especially with tasks that have lots of steps involved. So we want to think about, again, those critical skills that are really, really important that we do all the time and we really need to prioritize working on, but keeping expectations reasonable. So we don't want things to be too hard or overwhelming or really effortful to work towards building the skills to do every action. Like examples, meaning skills that have a lot of steps in them, things like brushing your teeth, washing your hands, making your bed. There's a lot of things involved in that. It's not just one response. So pick a few select goals at a time and prioritize putting your energies towards those. What's relevant? What is meaningful here? And so in this visual we have here, I'm talking about baby steps towards the end goal. And that reinforcement piece here, we want to differentiate our reinforcement. So we want to really facilitate independence by doing this. And we're talking about building skills this way. So here are a few examples of how you can differentially reinforce to get more independent skills. So maybe we're teaching requesting here, and the learner says, spin me. And when they say spin me independently, we spin them super fast and we're silly during it. And maybe it's even a longer time. So it is high quality here for that independent request. Whereas when I prompt them to say spin me, maybe I do it a little bit more slow. I'm a little bit more neutral. So we're really varying that, we're differentiating that affect and the speed that we're going. It's a lot more fun when you're independent and when you do it. Another example here is taking a look at high quality praise and adding in maybe a squeeze on the arms for a learner that likes that sensory input for meeting a step independently versus being more neutral when the parent helps with the steps. So again, neutral just means we're just keeping going. We're not expressing disappointment. We're not frustrated. There's no way to tell that. We're really just keeping it going, keeping it neutral affect, no major changes, but I'm going to be super excited when they get into that step and they do it on their own. And we're going to add in that extra squeeze in there as well. And lastly, here I have an example of time. So helping, let's say the learner helped clean up and they had minimal problem behavior, like Jamie was mentioning before. They finally cleaned up, they transitioned away from a favorite activity. Maybe we give them an extra 10 minutes on video games here, versus they were complaining during the entire routine, even though they ultimately did it. Maybe just different activities are available, not my favorite video game. So that quality, again, is where we're differentiating here. And once that step is independent, we're working on a new step. So I'm going to go a little bit quickly through these last few example slides. This is just a way to see how many different steps are in a large chain of behaviors. A skill like making a sandwich, there's many, many, many components here. And maybe you can focus on just working on the last part of the sequence. So putting those pieces of bread and sticking them together. And we teach all the steps before it together with help. But our goal here is really to pay attention to, you don't need to do every step at once all the time. You can take baby steps. You can work on things in a way that's practical in the home setting or community setting. And similarly, just the opposite direction we're going here, but working on the first step of washing hands here. So turning on the water. And this final example, it's really important that the child can play with their siblings. So we're talking about shaping and building up time here. So and also presence of an adult. So we just need to take into consideration where that learner is starting at and meet them where they're at and move forward in a way that's gradual and that helps them learn the skills that they need to learn. So finally, building skills is hard work. To get buy-in, we can also think about how to make learning fun. Duhanyan and colleagues in 2019 found that some children with neurodevelopmental disorders were shown to be more willing to participate, and they had higher independence when preferred materials were incorporated into self-care activities. So just putting those favorite characters on a cup or a toothbrush helped with the cooperation here. And for our last area to promote positive behavior, Jamie's going to share about what to do and how to react when challenging behaviors occur.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about teaching our skills, arranging the environment for success, but sometimes, despite our best efforts, we've done all of that. We're really, we're setting things up, we're providing reinforcement, challenging behavior can still occur. So what should we do in these situations? The first thing that we want to do is try to remain as neutral as possible. This is important so that we do not inadvertently reinforce the behavior. As we talked a little bit about before, there are different functions of challenging behavior. It's possible that attention might be one of the functions. So we want to try to avoid inadvertently reinforcing that behavior by remaining as neutral as we can. The next thing that we would want to do is redirect the behavior as neutrally as possible. So for example, if your child is throwing objects, we want to calmly remove the objects from the environment and redirect them to a more appropriate activity. You can also promote and prompt appropriate language at this time, or communication, as Brielle discussed earlier. If your child does not have vocal language, any type of communication to communicate the function of the behavior, such as if they want to be played with, play with me, or if they don't want to do the activity anymore, helping your child to communicate that based on why they may be engaging in the behavior. Of course, we want to ensure safety as well. If the behavior is dangerous, such as self-injurious behavior, aggression towards a sibling, or elopement, some other type of dangerous behavior, definitely take every precaution to de-escalate the behavior as quickly as possible to make sure that everyone remains safe. And finally, do your best to avoid reinforcing the behavior while still attending to your child and addressing the function of the behavior. So for example, if the child begins throwing objects and you hypothesize that the behavior is occurring in order to gain your attention, you're going to try to avoid attending to the throwing and instead prompt the child to ask for attention. And on our next slide, we're going to go into more detail about reinforcing alternative behavior while still addressing the root cause or function of the challenging behavior. So the last area that we want to talk about is differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, or DRA. This is a procedure where we establish new skills for the learner to get their needs met, while still decreasing the challenging behaviors that are currently functioning to get those needs met. So the challenging behavior no longer leads to reinforcement and instead is replaced by more functional and socially appropriate behavior. So in practice, DRA looks very similar to the functional communication training that Brielle reviewed earlier when we were discussing prevention strategies. An easy place to start is by maximizing reinforcement after the appropriate or replacement behavior occurs, and minimizing reinforcement after the problem behavior occurs. DRA might also involve reinforcing less severe challenging behavior before it escalates. So an example of this is that I've experienced in my own life. If a child is in the checkout line at the grocery store with you and asks for a treat, I might say, no, not right now. We can't have that right now. Then the child starts whining, getting a little bit louder. I hold my ground. We're still not getting the treat. Finally, a full meltdown starts. I give in. I get the treat to avoid everyone looking at me in the grocery store. So in this example, rather than accidentally teaching the child that they must escalate to a tantrum in order to access that treat, I might want to reinforce that initial ask, or maybe I'm going to reinforce some other precursors to the tantrum. So the child learns more appropriate replacement behaviors that still lead to accessing the reinforcer, and they also learn they do not have to engage in the more severe challenging behavior in order to get access to it. The great thing about this strategy is that even when it's done imperfectly, even if we might be reinforcing a little bit of challenging behavior, it can still produce meaningful outcomes. We just have to tie a greater rate of reinforcement to the appropriate behavior and reduce reinforcement for the inappropriate or challenging behavior. Also, DRA does not require extensive planning. It happens in the moment when the opportunity presents itself. So we talked earlier about the EE, the environmental rearrangement, enrichment, where we have to, identify different activities to do and kind of plan that out. DRA happens when it happens, when the challenging behavior occurs or when the opportunity to communicate occurs. So we just have to remember to prompt the child to engage in a functional alternative response that will lead to the same outcome. So for example, pointing to a toy rather than screaming. You may even be able to start identifying situations where the challenging behavior is likely to occur. So you've been in this situation before, you've seen the behavior occur here before. I think it's probably going to happen. And provide a prompt for the child to engage in the appropriate behavior before the challenging behavior even has a chance to happen. So this is a powerful teaching opportunity and shows your child that it's quicker and easier to engage in that appropriate behavior rather than the more severe challenging behavior.
So we've reached the end of our presentation today, and our general takeaways here in summary are that there are a lot of tools to use that you can help prevent and manage challenging behaviors. So these skills take time, as I was mentioning. Skill building is essential. We need to teach, we need to give our learners that space to learn and also maintain a sense of hope here where it is very possible to get towards the end goal. Taking baby steps, using visuals, providing lots of choice, and setting up the environment overall ultimately for success for the learner and for you. So these kind of strategies should be incorporated into the daily. They should just be a way of life. We hope that you can use some of these strategies to improve and maintain positive behavior in your daily life. And we're going to go towards our references and take some questions.
That was terrific. Thank you so much, Brielle and Jamie. What an informative, helpful presentation. So we have a few minutes, and we will see if there are a few questions here that we might be able to answer. So this question, I think, Brielle, I'll direct this question to you. What happens when there is a functional communication response that's taught? For example, I need more time. What if it morphs into more problem behavior? For example, yelling the functional communication response, demanding it even after the person has been provided with the item or activity. So the I need more time becomes the behavior in itself.
I love this question. It's a very common thing that happens also. And I think there's a lot of ways you can go about it. So the skill we're looking for here, right, is asking for more time and then they start to scream it. That's one aspect, right? So that could be a situation where you really work on the tone and the volume, right? And you can do, depending on the learner's language skills and their understanding of when you are able to explain things, you might be able to just simply prime them a little bit before by saying, you know, and you might even contrive this too, where you have lots of opportunities. I'm going to set this up, but when you ask, you really need to say it like this, and you can model that voice and volume. So do you see here how my voice sounds like it's calm, it's using a talking voice? If we scream, we still don't get it. So we're really, again, differentiating that the appropriate behavior here is not just saying it, but also a combination of the tone and the volume being involved. And then the second part, I would say also, it's always okay to teach a new script. It's always okay to teach a brand new way to ask for that thing, just to start over fresh and clean, that doesn't have a history already tied to it.
And what if the repetitive request for, let's say, more time keeps happening? Is there any strategy to help the learner understand that more time or one more minute, or I want to do it this way, if there has to reach a max? So if somebody has to go to school and get on a bus or go somewhere, there's only so many times the parent may be able to provide access to that item. Is there a strategy that might help cue the learner that there's only so many times you can ask for more of the item or time, for example?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there, again, is a few different ways you can go about this. I mean, one is we're talking here a little bit about the communication piece, and this is kind of step one, right? So we need to also work on the tolerance piece here, which is more so building that waiting time. Like, how long can they even wait for? And so the times where it's critical are times where are not really our teaching times, right? So we really need to set up a practice space where we can practice that regularly at a level where it's really reasonable and practical. So if we know that it's maybe 2 minutes that they can wait for, maybe we need to work on 2 minutes and 15 seconds while it's not the time where I need to get on the bus, and really delivering that reinforcement for them being able to tolerate that. And I would also say waiting is such an important skill, and it's a sort of a pet peeve of mine to just be like, wait, right? There's always things that you can go to. So I might even reference, like, I have, like, with a visual, like Jamie mentioned, a visual timer, right? Like, I really need 2 minutes. Here's your timer for 2 minutes. You can go jump on the trampoline, play with your books, and then I'll be done with dinner and I can talk to you. So really setting up clear expectations.
So it sounds like maybe teaching time, when there's pressurized time for the parent, may not be the best time for teaching, until those strategies are really well established, or those responses are really well established for the learner during some training sessions. Another parent had commented that their son is getting some reading specialists in a couple times a week, but there's some behavior that's interfering. In general, the parent's wondering if there may be more reinforcement required. Obviously, we can't comment on this specific example, but maybe how one might be able to embed more reinforcement within the context of these activities. I'm assuming that these are activities that the learner is capable of doing, but when things are hard, obviously we might recommend making things easier for learners in general. But can you comment at all, Jamie, about adding more reinforcement into instructional activities that might help strengthen responses within those activities, or create more motivation for learners within those activities that might be difficult?
Sure. A couple things. One thing that may be helpful, first of all, is just looking at pairing. If it's a new provider who is coming in and doing some challenging activities with the learner, looking at pairing the two together with some preferred activities, just having fun together and establishing that rapport is really helpful when starting new activities like that. Additionally, kind of as Brielle was discussing earlier, incorporating preferred items into tasks can be very helpful. So if it's a reading activity, perhaps the child is very interested in dinosaurs, and that's an interest that they have. So incorporating those types of activities into the more challenging activities can make it more fun. Another strategy that can be used is something that's called embedded activities. So you may be engaging in a fun play activity that may get paused for a few minutes. We're going to do a little bit of this work, and then we're going to go right back to that fun activity. And then you can start to increase the amount of time that the more challenging activity is happening for.
Whenever I hear, yeah, go ahead.
I would also take a look at the task itself too, right? Like, reading is so hard. It's such a hard skill. There's so many component skills involved in it. Often we need to break those skills down a little bit more. So I would really take a look at the task itself and what kind of skills it makes up. And if we could break it down and make it a little bit less aversive for that learner and teach them those component skills really to fluency, because it's just hard. Those skills are hard and they take time to build. And it could just simply be that it's just too big of a step to start with.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to say that myself, which is sometimes when it's hypothesized that it's because the task is hard that we're seeing challenging behavior, we always want to look at that task and see about ways to make it less difficult. And sometimes combining some of the fun activities along with the task can make it less unpleasant for the learner, and also identifying what those variables are that are making it more challenging for the learner is important. There's one more question here. Is there ever a downside to using the most preferred reinforcer for engagement in a task, where sometimes the more preferred activity can actually lead to behavior from terminating? So if someone's really interested in video, for example, that the video itself, while super potent and highly motivating, might actually be difficult to then transition from at the other end of the activity if it's used as a reward. So would you ever Would you ever consider not using a most preferred activity for some of the challenging, for engagement in some of the learning activities? Brielle?
We both
Sorry.
unmuted at the same exact time. We could totally both speak on it. I think it's a tough question because it really depends, right? There's a lot of questions that could be asked to give more information to inform the decision. I definitely do hear you. I think that there are sometimes, and also depends on where you are too, where it's maybe just not the best activity to use as a reinforcer. Especially videos. I will say, like, video electronics are tricky. Timing is tricky when you transition away from electronics. I would definitely take a look at, like, not interrupting in the middle of their favorite part of the video, or like they're just started watching a show and like it's 20 minutes long, but you tell them to get off at 10 minutes. Well, I think like me and you would also be upset if we were told we're not allowed to finish our show that we're watching. So just thinking about the timing, and also thinking about how often that item is available could also be something that helps with maybe decreasing that behavior if it's not something that they regularly have access to, that they're so motivated to keep it. And there was one other thing I was going to mention. Also thinking about how long, the time frame. So do they get access to it? It has to be a time frame that is reasonable for the amount of effort of the skill that they're working on.
Jamie, did you want to comment?
I think that was great. The only other thing that I would possibly mention is, thinking of transitioning away from activities, if that is another skill that we want to look at increasing and teaching, and maybe not starting with the most highly preferred activity that's very challenging to transition away from, but teaching that as a skill and something we can look at.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's what I was thinking, which is that coming away from an activity is a skill, and we should build that to fluency first, and starting maybe with lower preferred or less preferred videos, and really practicing, okay, we're going to turn this off, and when you do, you're going to get X, and it might be something that's been restricted that they really like a preferred snack or something that they can practice the termination. And then once that's a little more fluent, then terminating it at other times after instruction as a reinforcer, when it's provided as a reinforcer, might make things a lot easier. Well, that was very helpful. Well, that's the end of our questions. You can, I think the QR code is presented here on the screen. And feel free to screenshot that to learn about some of the other lectures in the series. Again, you're going to get a follow-up email with the recorded version. Feel free to share and spread the word. The next slide just outlines a little bit of our presentation, our services rather, that we provide. Feel free to reach out to us for a free consultation on the various services that we provide at Alpine Learning Group. So thank you so much for joining today. Thank you, Brielle, and thank you, Jamie, for a wonderful presentation. Thanks, everyone.